Welcome, friend. I'm TK, your tour guide to the past, and you are listening to For the Love of History, the podcast where we talk about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hokusai's Great Wave painting is arguably the most famous piece of art in the world, if not the most replicated and reproduced. We've seen great waves on t-shirts, on shoes, on cups, on literally any piece of clothing or item that you can think of, from dishware to underwear, and everything in between. Hokusai's Great Wave is instantly recognizable and all around us. And I would bet that if you asked any random person on the street who created the Great Wave, they could probably tell you it was Hokusai. But what if I were to tell you that he may not have done the painting alone, and there was a second secret ghost brush that has been pushed behind the scenes for over a century? Today, dear one, we will be talking about Hokusai's daughter, his ghost brush, and his studio partner, Katsushika Oi. But before we do that, you know what time it is. It's housekeeping time, because we got to keep the lights on here at the History Headquarters. So to start us off, I would love to remind you that we do have a For the Love of History app that we are currently fundraising for. That app will include things like history scavenger hunts, quiz games that correspond with each episode, hydration check-ins, and so much more. So if you'd like to help get that app going and become a beta tester when it is finally ready, then you can head to the show notes below and donate whatever amount is best for you. And if you can't donate or don't want to, that's also fine. Thank you so much for your consideration. Maybe at a later date. Number 2 is the History BFF trip. We are going to Japan. Well, you're coming here. I'm already here in Japan. You're gonna come see me from August 24th to the 30th. We still have a few spots available for this trip, so if you would like to secure your spot on this trip from August 24th to the 30th in Osaka, Kyoto, and Nara, you can secure your spot for just a 25% down payment of the full booking price. So I hope I see you there. We're gonna do some matcha making. We're going to visit some temples, some shrines. We're gonna eat so much food together. And we might even get a chance to see some woodblock prints in one of my favorite shops. I know. It's gonna be really fun. So I hope to see you there. And our final piece of business is go ahead and subscribe. Give us a cheeky little press of the button, babe. Okay? It's just one little boop, just right there. I see your finger moving toward the subscribe. Yeah. Yep. There, go ahead and push it. Okay, now over to the like. Yeah, there you go. Okay, thanks so much. Great job. I really appreciate it. And it really helps the podcast grow and find our other history BFFs that are out there somewhere in the ether looking for us. And with that, housekeeping is over, and it is time to pick up a brush and a beverage, and let's get to it. I'm about to say something controversial yet brave. Hokusai's Great Wave is kind of like the Mona Lisa. Big reputation, small impact. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? Both pieces of art are great and important, and all art is valid, but I'm being honest, they're underwhelming. They're okay. They're just okay. I've seen them both in person, and I feel qualified to say I felt a little about both of them. All right? And I'm no art critic, okay? But I do feel that I have pretty good taste in many facets of my life. And I think there are so many cooler pieces that Hokusai and other artists have created, and I was confused as to why these two got so much attention. But it's all really just right place, right time kind of situation. And dumb, bad, and good luck, not to mention missed opportunities and bad timing, is what drives our story today. Because for every artist who gets famous, There's another just as talented, just as groundbreaking, but they are lost to history. Sometimes they don't play the game right. Sometimes history just isn't on their side. And sometimes their biggest mistake is being born a woman. Hokusai's Great Wave towers over the art world, frozen in time, a singular, undeniable masterpiece. But there is a brush behind the brush, a shadow lurking just beneath the crest. While the world has fixated on the Great Wave, history has quietly erased one of its creators. Yes, you heard me right. Creators. That's an S at the end. That's a plural. That's what we like to call a plural in the education game. Because Hokusai wasn't working alone on the Great Wave. And that's where our story begins today. This is the story of Katsushika Oi, the ghost brush of Hokusai. So let us start at the beginning. Around the year 1800, Kotome, Hokusai's second wife, gave birth to his fourth daughter, Eijo. Like her sisters before her, as soon as she could, Eijo was in her father's studio learning the artist's way. How to prepare inks, create sketches, master the techniques of drawing the perfect circle, composing a piece, and handling all of the ins and outs of running a successful art studio in the heart of Edo, Japan, what we now call Tokyo. Though they were skilled artists themselves, they were never the face of the studio. Apprentices in Hokusai's studio would come and go, and with them, so too did his daughters. Each married an artist and gave up not only their family name, but their occupation. You see, in Edo, Japan, and even now in modern times, daughters who married left not just their family name, but often their occupation as well. Whatever the husband was doing, that's what the wife would support. And those husbands were extremely lucky to have married the Master Hokusai's daughters. Eijo, although the youngest, was the same, or so it seemed. She married one of her father's former apprentices, Minamizawa Tome, also known by his artist name Tsutsumi Tome. But just 3 years later, Tome divorced his wife because of her harsh criticisms of his work. According to the biographer Iijima Kyoshin, she laughed in her husband's face and gave her opinions one too many times, so he gave her the boot. But Iijima, dear one, is a fan of half-truths and full lies, so I'd like you to keep that in your cute little noggin for later, okay? So with no husband and no home of her own, Eijo did the only thing she could do. She returned to her father's workshop, and for the next 2 decades, sat contentedly by his side, simply assisting him during the height of his career until the passage of time took the artist to the next great adventure beyond the world of the living, or so the story goes. If you believe that cotton-headed ninny-muggin, Eijima. And dear one, we do not. If we simply went by the 2 or 3 pages Eijima wrote about Eijo in his Hokusai biography, our story would end here. But I am nothing if not a thorough bitch, and I went deep diving into the depths of the internet because I could feel it in my nuggets that this could not be all there was to Eijo's story. So I followed my nuggets all the way to a YouTube video with less than 100 views and now 3 likes. One of them is mine. To find Professor Julie Nelson Davis, who is doing her darndest to piece together the story of Eijo. Much of what you are going to hear today comes from her research, and you bet your bottomless dollar that I have already chaos emailed her to ask her to come onto the podcast. But I digress. Thanks to her effort and the work of a handful of art historians, the true influence of Eijo is being uncovered, and the one-dimensional image of her is getting a 4D makeover. So let's rewind to Eijo's time as her father's apprentice and find out what really happened. According to Eijima, she was merely a little helper gal, okay, mixing paints and getting paper for her dear old dad, and definitely not creating masterpieces of her own, getting commissioned to make super expensive pieces of artwork and co-creating with her father in the 2 most successful decades of his life. No. Absolutely not. Sarcasm. Very heavy sarcasm. She was doing all of those things. Eijo, who since returning to her father's studio in 1827 went by the artist's name Oi, was much more than an assistant that Eijima would have you believe. Hokusai and Oi were co-creators and partners in most, if not all, of the work coming out of the studio after her return. And this idea of co-creation might be difficult to understand without the idea of what studios were like during the Edo period. So you bet your sweet little glazed donutty butt that we are going to be talking about it. So get your notes out, all right? Unless you're driving, don't do that. Many people might imagine Hokusai's 19th century Japanese art studio as just one dude sitting at a desk, making some art, sending it out. There you go, done. However, these studios were more like little factories. You would have apprentices, assistants, and the master of the studio all working together to create pieces. The master would be teaching, the apprentices would be learning through practical work, and the assistants would be assisting in so many different ways, like, of course, preparing the inks, but also preparing sketches that would be sent out for final approval. Okay, so remember this. We're going to talk about this more later. Hokusai's studio was both a print and a painting studio. Art during this time was very collaborative, especially when it came to wood block printing or ukiyo-e. To create a single ukiyo-e or wood block print, you needed a designer, an engraver, a printer, and a publisher. Most of the work during this time was done on commission. Some artists, like Hokusai, were able to create freely, but for the most part, a publisher would commission a piece, the designer would work with their studio to create the art, and assistants or apprentices would work on sketches to plan out the design. They would work on color sampling. They would basically do all of the little bits and bobs to help create that final piece, and they would work, English is hard, on the final piece that got sent to the publisher. So after all of this was done, and with the masters finishing up and putting his stamp of approval on it, it would be sent off to the publisher. The publisher would take a look, he would either approve, disapprove, and if it got the go-ahead, it would be sent to the carver, and the carver would make a giant stamp. And we gotta pause right here because this is really cool and really weird, and I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but I have to talk about this because it's like, oh, it's in my brain and I need you to know about it. So in order to make the woodblock print, the original piece of art had to be destroyed, because what the carvers did was take the painting, okay, the design, and they would put it on the block of wood, and they would use this like sticky adhesive stuff to adhere the painting onto the block of wood, and then they would carve into the painting which is on the wood, thus destroying the painting in the process of creating the wood block print, which is just, and I don't know if everybody realizes that, but I think it's really, really cool that you have to destroy the original artwork in order to make a copy. And all I'm thinking about is Hannah, our resident archaeologist. And I don't know if she knows about that, but I hope she does. Anyways, I need you to know about that. And I need you to tell as many people as you possibly can, because it's really important information to me. Anyways, thank you. So after the wood block was created, then it would be sent off to the printer to create the final piece, or, and this is very important, pieces. There's that little plural S again. sneaking up on us. A surprising number of steps went into the creation of Ukiyo-e, and many of our favorite pieces were commissioned. Even the Great Wave, which is formally known as Under the Wave of Kanagawa, was commissioned by Nishimuraya Yohachi as a series of 36 images depicting Mount Fuji. And also, side note, he was in a cult of like 70,000 artists and merchants who worshiped Mount Fuji as like a god of longevity. But that is the story for another time. Also, Hokusai was also like maybe probably a part of this cult. Anyways, when the 36 images were created, my brain, it's just squirrel brain today, okay? This is my special interest. So I have a lot to say about it. Anyways, when the 36 images were created, they were sold for less than a bowl of noodles. Of little noodles. Now, one print of the Great Wave is worth millions of dollars. But during the time, you could pick one up for some nudes. The same price, not nudes, noodle, right? Which is one of the things that contributed to its popularity, to the entire set's popularity, was its affordability. Another reason the Great Wave of Kanagawa in particular became popular was that it used a new European pigment called Prussian blue. Before that, blues were made of indigo and dayflower petals in Japan, which are pretty, but they definitely lack that same like blue ka-chow-ness that Prussian blue has, and that blue that we have come to associate with the Great Wave. It's a very bluey blue. So people are like, wow, so beautiful, so affordable. Love that. And here's where our first little bit of serendipity comes into play in this story. The series was created in 1831 when Japan was still very much in its period of isolation. So technically, European art, products, and materials weren't really allowed in the country, but there was a black market and people made exceptions for pretty shit. So that was great. We love that. Hokusai had made other prints very similar to the Great Wave, but the color impact was severely lacking in the cracking. So the availability of that Prussian blue during this time was a fantastical serendipitous moment. If it had been any earlier or any later, there might have been different rules and different things. And so who knows, okay? Herein lies 3 of the first serendipitous dumb luck occasions: the affordability of the prints, making them more popular, the availability of new European prints, and the nature of how ukiyo-e was created, making it more affordable. But here's the kicker, the tea, if you will. When the 36 views of Fuji were created, Oi had been back in her father's studio for 4 years and had taken a prominent position in the studio. So the likelihood that Oi played a part, if not a very significant part, in the creation of the Great Wave is like very, 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 very likely. And it probably happened to the nearest degree of certainty that I can possibly get without saying, yes, she definitely participated in the creation of the Great Wave. That's how certain I and many other historians are about her participation in the creation of the Great Wave, given the fact that she and her father were working so closely together. And this is where we get into the debate of how much she really was involved in her father's work. In Iijima Kyoshin's biography, written 44 years after the death of Hokusai in 1849, by the way, when Hokusai died, Iijima was just 8 years old, just saying, he describes Oi's role as simply an assistant. He never met the man. He was never in the studio. He didn't know. He describes Oi's role as simply an assistant and gives her about 3 pages of recognition in his biography, even though she was working with her father for 2 decades, and those 2 decades were his most successful and influential time periods in his career. But We also have contemporary sources from other people and artists, and we have actual evidence of their collaboration as well. For example, this picture of a Japanese dog on the inside surrounded by a circular border of flowers. We know for sure, 100%, that this was a collaborative piece between Hokusai and his daughter. We know it. It's 100% confirmed. We know. We also have evidence within other pieces that there are two very distinct brush strokes in pieces that are credited to Hokusai alone. But when you look at the images, you can see two very distinct brush lines. Very long brush strokes and very short brush strokes. So not just like there's a short line here and we make a short line, and then there's a long line here when we make a long line. No, if there is a long continuous line, the ones that are speculated to be Oi's are smooth and continuous. But the lines that are still long but made up of not a continuous line, but smaller little lines are presumed to be Hokusai's. And these small lines make sense once you know that Hokusai was struck by lightning, had a stroke, had palsy, and was in his 60s at the height of his career, these last 2 decades of his life. So of course, it would make sense that given all that he's been through, given his health conditions and his age, he would make shorter strokes to create the images. And Oi, being younger than him, would create longer strokes. So this is one of the ways that art historians are trying to identify the collaboration between Oi and Hokusai. They're going through lots of these prints and paintings to find these differences. And we also have first-hand accounts. For example, sources like Saito Geshin, a Japanese author from the late Edo period, who wrote in his 1948 memoir, quote, "This daughter draws many of the block-ready drawings that appear under the name of Itsu." Itsu was one of Hokusai's many artist names. When he changed like his style, he also changed his name. So it was like if, for example, if like Picasso changed his name to something different during his blue period and then something different after his blue period was over, that's kind of how Japanese artists during the Edo period worked, which is really annoying. But anyways, Itsu was what he called himself during this time. And block-ready drawings are paintings that were ready to be turned into stamps. They were like approved, they were ready to go. So what this man, Saito Geshin, is saying is that the daughter is drawing many of the block-ready drawings. So many of the drawings that are ready to go be turned into woodblock prints, she is doing them. She is the one who is creating these pieces. And there are some other letters and accounts of others saying the same thing, that Oi completed the drawings that were turned into Ukiyo-e, but she turned them in under her father's name, which makes sense from a branding perspective. In Dr. Julia's lecture, she says that we hate to think about artists doing things for money, but they gotta eat too. So branding and getting the most money you can from your art was and still is important. By publishing art created by Oi but under her father's name, they would make more money. And further evidence comes from an invoice letter discussing painting pieces that says basically, we agree that the daughter will do the art, but will charge the father's price for the figures if they put his stamp on it, which is just another brick in the dumb unluck wall that has hidden Oi from history. Money needed to be made in his old age, and even though she was talented, she became his ghost brush. But Oi wasn't just an invisible hand in her father's work. She had her own artistic identity, her own unmistakable style. And let me tell you, she was a character, and I want to be her best friend so bad. So if we could get time travel up and running so I can go back and be besties with Oi, that would be great. Because this wasn't a woman who faded quietly into the background. Nay, nay, dear one. Oi had opinions, a sharp tongue, and a complete disregard for social conventions. So let's take a moment to appreciate her, and not just as Hokusai's ghost brush, but as the powerhouse artist, an unapologetic weirdo that she truly was. If Oi was taking one of those BuzzFeed "What animal am I" tests, her result would be honey badger, because Oi don't give a fuck. Zero, none, zip, zilch, okay? The only thing that this woman cared about was her dad and her art. And that's it. Like the rest of Oi's life, we have to piece together her personality by what was written about her and through her art. And we can't really trust Iijima because he was incredibly biased, and the biography he wrote is a product of his time, which was the Meiji era, a very nationalistic, colonization era. Women should be seen making good sons and not heard talking about their feelings or rights. kind of a time period. I don't like the Meiji era. It's my least favorite. It's my least favorite era in Japanese history. Don't like it. So, because of this and the fact that Iijima was just making shit up for no reason, with no evidence, well, for nationalism in his biography. There's a whole thing about it. I'll leave Dr. Julia's lecture in the show notes and you can hear all about it. She goes into extremely detailed details as to why his biography is not the best. So we're gonna ignore everything that Iijima wrote about Oi and turn to other sources and her art itself. Starting with that fella, Saito Geshin, the guy that we were talking about earlier. In the same memoir entry that he wrote about Oi doing the block-ready images, he also gives some hilarious insight into the manic pixie dream girl life that Oi and her father lived. Geshin wrote that Hokusai has moved dozens of times. All these were rented houses, small and cramped. His youngest daughter, A, resembles her father in that she does not wash dishes after a meal, leaving them lying around without a care. She was married to Ukiyo-e artist Minamizawa, but being divorced, she lives with her father. She is about 50 years old. And then he goes on to say, even when they, Hokusai and Oi, receive fresh fish as a present, they find it too troublesome to cook and usually give it away to someone else. These two were the OG manic pixie dream girls, okay? They were making a mess, they were doing their art, they gave no fucks about anything other than the art that they were making. Oi and her father were so engrossed in their work that rather than cleaning their house, they would just move when the mess got to be too much. They were just like, well, okay, it's time to get the fuck out. We can't walk in here anymore. It's getting to be unhealthy. And I love this for her, and she definitely follows in the footsteps of her father, who Hokusai was also a rebellious little so-and-so, and he got kicked out of his art academy for contraband European artwork that he had, because you're not supposed to have European artwork and you weren't supposed to stray from the masters, and he was straying. He was becoming his own master. So I love that connection between the two of them. And Oi, following her father's footsteps, did not follow the social standards of the time forced upon her. And she would smoke tobacco, she drank sake, she would wear comfortable male clothing, and just generally didn't give a shit about her appearance. Art was her focus, and attaining the skills of her father was her goal. And I would say that she attained her goal, and her skill and hard work was recognized by not only her father, but other artists as well. Keisei Eisen, a master of bijinga, or pictures of beautiful women, praised her by saying that she was skilled at drawing, and following her father has become a professional artist while acquiring a reputation as a talented painter. So we have evidence that she herself had a reputation outside of her father's shadow. But it seems, whether by design or just bad luck, she could not step out from that shadow. But that's not to say that she didn't create her own beautiful pieces of art. We can see the talent that she had in the 12 paintings that we can clearly trace back to her. One of these pieces was an incredible silk painting. Now, being commissioned to draw a block-ready piece was one thing, but being commissioned to paint on silk was another. And thankfully, one of the paintings that we have that we can say for sure is hers is one such silk painting. A grotesque but gorgeous depiction of the operation on Guan Yu's arm, who was a famous Chinese general. In the foreground of the picture, you have a gruesome scene of a physician bleeding and scraping the bone of Guan Yu to release the poison from a battle wound. When you first look at it, all you can see is the blood cascading from the wound and the giant bowl catching it all. That is so heavy with the weight of the blood that it is crushing the servant holding it. But once you get over the initial shock, your eyes start to wander to the figure's clothing. You can see every detail of their hanfu, the gorgeous robes and the rich blues. It's almost as if you could reach out and touch them. Once your eyes have taken in all there is to see at the bottom of the painting, your eyes move up the rectangle shape and you are hit with the calm and stark contrast of the food meticulously placed on neat little tables. And finally, your eyes zero in on the delicate sashimi and vegetables, an incredibly realistic rendering of a bottle filled with liquid. At the front, there's chaos, but in the back, there's calm. But the whole piece feels so cohesive. This motif is not an unusual one. The tale of Guan Yu's bloodletting has been done by many artists, such as one of my favorites, Utagawa Kuniyoshi. But the composition, coloring, and essence of the print is completely different. In Kuniyoshi's version, red and blue dominate the piece because it was a woodblock printing and not a painting. The composition is also very cluttered, and the bloodletting is a minor detail in the story of the piece. And there's much less of a visceral impact than Oi's. This piece was commissioned specifically to Oi herself. And being commissioned to do a silk painting meant that the person who was commissioning you had great faith in your ability, and you probably were pretty well known as an artist. Painting on silk was not cheap. The materials weren't cheap, and it required a lot of skill. So clearly, Oi was well known enough for the commissioner to lay down a fat stack of money for that piece. We can also see Oi's distinct style in two other pieces that she created. And these pieces are woodblock prints, but when you see them, they have a feeling of a painting. And if you're listening in the audio version, don't worry, I will describe these woodblock prints to you in excruciating detail, but I must encourage you, dear one, to look at the woodblock prints because they are chef's kiss, delicious, and I'll leave links below so that you can see them for yourself, but I digress. So, the first piece we'll talk about goes by the very creative name of Girl Composing a Poem Under the Cherry Blossoms in the Night, which is exactly what the painting is. It's a girl at night writing a poem under a cherry blossom tree. So, when you look at other ukiyo-e prints from this time, even when they are depicting night scenes, they're very bright. And much of the color of the paper comes through because, money, right? But in this piece, you will notice that it is incredibly dark. And it looks exactly how you would imagine a night scene lit by only a single lantern would look. The top of the rectangular picture is a dreamy night sky. The black is black. The night sky is black and it's dotted with white stars. But in the middle ground, there are even blacker shadows of trees. In the foreground is a young woman who is lit by lamplight, writing a poem that we will never read. Her face is incredibly delicate. Oi was extremely well known in her time for being able to draw women more beautifully than even her father. Behind the girl is a small bunch of cherry blossoms that may have been the inspiration for her spontaneous poem. And that's the only bit of cherry blossom we see in this entire painting. This piece was commissioned by a restaurant, and only one print of it was created as far as we know. Apparently, this print would be brought out only on special occasions, and it would be displayed in a small alcove by candlelight when the restaurant was holding special nighttime dinner events. So you can just imagine, right? Oi was commissioned to make a piece that was not on display all the time. It was only taken out during specific occasions and for only special events. So it must have meant that her art was special, that she had a name for herself. I'm just saying is all. And the final piece that I want to tell you about today, dear one, is my personal favorite and the one that I think has the most impact. During this time, erotic images and advertising for oiran and other high-class prostitutes, as well as kabuki theaters, were some of the most popular commissioned ukiyo-e. These pieces were art, yes, but they were also advertisements enticing customers to come to the red light district in Edo known as Yoshiwara. And in these woodblock prints, the oiran and courtesans were always front and center. Their faces were painted to the gods and their offers were on full display. All of their sexiest bits, aka their ankles, the back of their necks, and a piece of cloth in their mouth. Edo period erotica was weird. You got tentacle porn and you got backs of necks is what people found sexy. We might have to do a whole episode on that later, but not today. So, these images were made to evoke a feeling of class and elegance and a come hither feeling. But Oi's depiction of Yoshiwara was anything but. Maybe it was the fact that she was a woman, or maybe it was her fascination with light and shadow, or a combination of the two. Whatever it was, Oi's night scene in Yoshiwara takes a completely different look at life as a Yoshiwara prostitute. It wasn't glamorized. It wasn't over the top. Her night scene it's dark and haunting and almost suffocating. Our perspective of this image is not of standing right in front of a courtesan. Nay. Our perspective, dear one, is that of a bird soaring over one of the many lattice showcases that the women would sit in, waiting to be picked by a customer. And instead of clearly seeing these women's faces, most of them are obscured by the prison-like lattice that surrounds them. It's not the usual bright, seductive portrayal of the district. Instead, you feel the suffocation of their lives, the invisibility of the countless women whose stories were never seen and never heard. Although there are dozens of women in the image, we can see the face of only one. Maybe it's just me reading too much into it, but to me, that seems like a commentary on the fact that there were over 5,500 women in Yoshiwara at any given time, and that area was about the size of the White House. It was a super small area, and only a fraction of these women ever garnered any sort of fame to make enough money for themselves or escape their situation. This picture is one that haunts me, but it's beautiful at the same time. Now, I could talk all day about Oi and her 12 paintings, but we must move on. And speaking of her 12 paintings, one of the questions that I had was why, if Oi was working as an artist for so long, how do we only have 12 of her works left? And that, dear one, is another stroke of dumb and bad luck. Through fire that destroyed their studio and famine and so much more, her pieces just vanished. And I'll be talking about that more in the TK Unscripted episode for this episode. It's the episode that comes after the episode because I have a lot to say over on Patreon. So if you want to listen to that, you can join us over there. As beautiful and haunting as Oi's pieces are, their fame pales in comparison to her father's. Even though she collaborated with him during the 2 most successful decades of his career, and her name was obviously known. And her role in the studio must have increased, especially in the last decade, with her father suffering a stroke, palsy, and being struck by lightning and simply the ravages of time. She must have been doing more work in his name as the years passed, but while her father was immortalized in the history books, Oi's role as a co-creator has remained invisible. As nothing more than a footnote here and there and very short Wikipedia entry, she became the ghost brush behind the Great Wave, unseen, unheard, and erased by history and terrible, terrible luck. Imagine creating something so monumental with someone that you loved, but having no one know you did it. One of the most iconic pieces of art in the world that you contributed to, but having no one know you even exist. That is the tragedy and irony of Oi's life. Unfortunately, in 1849, her father passed away and Oi faded into obscurity. We have no idea what she did after her father's death, but presumably she never created art again, at least not that we know of. Her life and death after her father's passing is a complete mystery to history, and we will probably never know what happened to her, but I like to think in my optimistic little heart that she went off into the woods somewhere and lived life in the mountains, painting until the last moments of her life. But again, that's just my little optimistic brain. But I would like to remember her now, and I hope that you will join me in spreading her memory. So let's raise our respective beverages to Katsushika Oi, not just as Hokusai's ghost brush, but as a force of nature in her own right. A woman who defied the odds, carved out her own path, and created art that still whispers to us through time. Time and circumstance has tried to erase her, but we are here to remind both that you cannot hide greatness, no matter how hard you try. So next time you gaze at the Great Wave, remember, you are looking at more than just one artist. You are looking at the shadow of a woman who fought to leave her mark. Well, dear one, we have come to our final thought, and I have a few things to say about this. So, love the story. It's fantastic. And I want to point you to the direction of a few other pieces of media that you can watch in order to get a better understanding of Oi's life. So there is a manga and an anime called Miss Hokusai that was created in the 1980s, and I think in 2004 it was turned into a movie. don't quote me on that. Yes, I think it was. And it's great. The manga and the anime are fantastic. And then there is also an NHK series. It's like the BBC and PBS of Japan. And they created a series on her. I don't love the series. It's not my favorite. They do take some artistic liberties, but I do think it still is worth a watch. So I will put links down in the show notes to all of those things, and I hope you enjoy those pieces of media. Well, dear one, that is all she wrote. We are done. Episode 164 in the books. I think it was a great one to end on for Women's History Month. I hope you agree. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for bearing with me as I got through a difficult time the last 2 weeks. I really appreciate your patience with changes in the episode schedule. That was really, really great, really kind, really appreciate it. So thank you so much for that. We are back on schedule for the rest of the season, which is coming to an end. We have only 5 more episodes in the season left, so we better soak it all in. But thank you for joining me today. If you haven't already, please leave a rating or review if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform. And if you are watching on YouTube, tell me who your favorite artist is. What do you think of the Great Wave? And have you ever heard of Oi before? Let's start some discourse. Do you really think that Oi participated in the Great Wave? I want to know your ideas. Let's talk. Let's talk about it. Or if you don't want to talk about it, let me know what you were doing while you were listening to this episode. Each like and each comment help the algorithm know that this is a great episode for people to watch, and it helps with the monetization of the YouTube so that I can keep making these episodes. So it's one of the best free 99 ways to support the podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast in other ways, you can join us over on Patreon, where we have ad-free episodes, early released episodes, things like TK Unscripted. You get all of the behind the scenes for the mini museum series. Members on the higher tiers get to choose the book club book. They get to choose the artifacts that we do for the mini museum series. We get a newsletter. There's lots of fun things over on Patreon. So if you want to join us over there, that would be great. That would be awesome. If not, that's totally okay. You can grab yourself some merch. You can share this episode with your... Ted is causing a ruckus over there. You can share this or any episode with your history BFF or somebody who thinks you who you think needs to be converted into a delicious donut. Whatever you do, I appreciate you just being here. And with that, I will tell you to drink your water. I've got mine right here. Let's take a little sippy sip together. That was a big sippy sip. That was a large sip. Do something that makes you happy. Be kind to yourself this week. I know the world is on fire, on literal fire. There's like a fire here in Imabari, like over there. Anyways, happy thoughts. Take care of yourself. I love you so much. I will see you later. Okay. Goodbye. So long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Adieu. You can do it. Oh. Woo, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Woo, woo. Let's go. Thank you for the motivation. Yeah. Okay. Microphone. Oh. Nail down. We have a nail down. I'm wearing press-ons today because... What are you doing? Straw, Tam. Straw! Because I'm working on the mini museum series also. I don't want to do my nails and then just take them off and then put them back on. That's annoying. Super annoying. Gosh! Diggity dang. Lighting, oh god. Can you hear that? Can you hear Ted absolutely losing her shit? Julia Nelson Davis. Julia. Okay, oh, okay. Do you know what I realize these bloopers are? Just every ADHD thought in my brain it just comes right out. Just ideas, thoughts, opinions. Hey, man, you goofy goober. Silly computer. And the land is dark, and the moon is the only light we see. It's my Hokusai. Mother, son of a gun. Stay on, Nail. Okay, let's go.